Well, today we're going to go for a ride in what these days is a very unusual aircraft. This is a PCA-2 Autogiro built in about 1931 by the Pitcairn Autogiro company. It isn't a helicopter, although it looks like one to our 21st century eyes. That rotor isn't powered by the engine. It freewheels in the airflow as the prop drags it forwards, generating lift as it turns. We have no control over the rotor. It just acts by and large like a conventional wing. First we need to start her up. That's a Wright J6 Whirlwind engine at the front, and we can go ahead and start it up like we would any other contemporary aircraft. So fuel on, mixture full rich, a few shots of prime if we're cold, mags to both. Then we make sure we're standing on the brakes or have the parking brake set. Hit the starter and it should fire right up. So once the engine's started, you should see positive oil pressure and rising oil and cylinder head temperatures. Just one word of caution here. Cold and dark startups are notoriously buggy in FSX, and it is possible to get into a state where the engine won't start under any circumstances, and often this happens if you start up and shut down a few times in a row. So if things seem to be behaving illogically, you might need to reload the aircraft. So next we need to get that rotor turning. The first autogyros had no mechanical spin up, which meant they needed long takeoff runs and often lots of taxiing backwards and forwards to get that rotor up to takeoff speed. The Sierra C8, of which this aircraft is a direct descendant, had its rotor spun up by a couple of ground crew pulling on a long rope, a bit like starting a giant outboard motor. But Pitcairn was the first to develop a mechanical pre-rotator which took power from the engine up this long linkage to get the rotor turning. This is all simulated in an approximate way. To release the rotor brake, we need to rotate the handle up to the horizontal and then push it forwards. Then we can engage the clutch and the rotor starts to spin, and we can see the rotor RPM rise on the gauge in the cockpit. So that's it, we're ready to fly. It's vital, by the way, to always check that the rotor brake handle is in the horizontal position before takeoff, and this includes if you use Control E to auto start the engine. The takeoff itself is simple, just add full power and keep it straight until it lifts off. Like all the early autogyros, this one has a fixed rotor and conventional control surfaces for manoeuvring. This means we fly it just like a fixed wing aircraft with a stick and pedals controlling ailerons, elevators and rudder. It also handles conventionally in the cruise, although we'll see that there are some differences at low speed in a while. In flight the aircraft is fast for its time and it has a good rate of climb. It's snappier in yaw than a conventional fixed wing, so we can turn fast on the rudder, although we do lose a bit of speed because we're swinging that fuselage out into the airflow. We can use the same effect to finesse a descent, just like we would side slip a fixed wing aircraft, and this lets us come down really quickly when we want to. Again, we can fly the approach conventionally, and we don't really want to get below about 40 miles per hour for most of the way in. For short landings, even in still air, we can reduce the airspeed to 30 miles per hour on short final and still control descent rate with the engine. At these speeds, aileron control is reduced, and you do need to be aware that assertive rudder operations will cause significant loss of speed. Although a rotary wing is essentially unstallable, due to the way it's simulated here, this one effectively stalls at about 20 miles per hour, and the only way to recover is to push the nose down to about 70 degrees until the speed comes back up. Engine power has no effect on this behaviour. Timing things just right, you can use that stall to reduce the speed almost to zero in the final flare and drop it onto the wheels, although this requires a bit of judgment because once you hit that stall, or pseudo stall if you like, it's impossible to abort the landing. Once you're down, the aircraft stops almost instantly on the brakes, so near spot landings are achievable with practice. With a headwind, of course, you can make vertical or near vertical landings, but again it takes good judgment and practice. Because it's so top heavy, the real aircraft was prone to tipping over even with that wide landing gear, and so landing in a crosswind was something to be avoided. Simulated aircraft is more forgiving, and because of the high nose angle in the final approach, it's a lot easier to fly in sideways so you can see where you're going, and it also gives much better control of the speed. We can also achieve short and very steep takeoffs with or without a headwind. The technique here is to push the nose forward on full power until the tail comes up and then immediately pull it off the ground into a steep climb, keeping the speed back to about 50 miles per hour. This gives us an outrageous angle of climb, but we do need to be careful not to overdo it. One of the things this aircraft does better than fixed wings is to fly and manoeuvre slowly. We've already seen that assertive yaw control allows tight turns and by using aileron and elevators too, we can almost turn in place at very low speeds. These are uncoordinated skidding turns, of course, so we do need to be aware of losing too much speed and use power to maintain altitude. For the ultimate high performance turn, we can get a chandelle or hammerhead by using full power and full rudder at the vertical and then pulling it through with full elevator. Other aerobatic manoeuvres are also possible, and these aircraft could perform loops and barrel rolls in real life. The autogyro will continue to fly, or glide, with the engine off. In a helicopter we'd say the wing was auto-rotating, but in an autogyro it's always auto-rotating, so nothing changes except the descent rate. It's the airflow up through the rotor that causes it to turn, and with the engine off the energy comes entirely from gravity. As long as the rotor turns fast enough it continues to supply lift, and again the glide is just like a conventional fixed-wing aircraft, except with enhanced performance in the flare. You can achieve a very quick and near vertical descent by holding the stick all the way back, but you do need to be aware that you're in that pseudo-stalled zone, and even with quick reactions you're going to need 100 or 200 feet to regain control and arrest the descent, regardless of engine input. What you'll find is even pushing the nose forward to build up speed doesn't affect the descent rate noticeably below 30 miles per hour, whether you add power or not. And then as you pass through 30 miles per hour there's an abrupt step and the speed shoots upwards. The reality is that FSX doesn't model autogyros, and this aircraft uses a twin engine FSX flight model with engine 2 as part of the rotor simulation, and that low speed behaviour is a compromise solution if you like. But there it is, flying the autogyro. It's a pretty easy aircraft to fly in the sim, but it does give us a fairly unique package, and in particular those very steep takeoffs and landings, and quite interesting slow flight behaviour.